Hi everyone, today's grammar lesson that we have for you is another review lesson. Today's review is on the progressive verb tense. But also, recently you should have learned about complex sentences. So what I want to do is show you, again, just reviewing, how we use the progressive verb tense, when do we use it, and also kind of a way to expand your sentence writing or your speaking ability by showing you how to use the progressive tense using a complex sentence as well. These are elements that you should have already learned by now, and so let's get into it. So what is the progressive verb tense? Basically, you're doing this idea of a continuing action. So you have an action that is not just at one point in time and then it's done. What you're doing is you're stretching out the idea of time. Now, realistically, nothing really happens like that. Even snapping took a couple of milliseconds, right? So things rarely actually happen in just one quick moment in time. But when we break down time, when we stretch out time, you can kind of look inside and see that an action was taking place from a starting point and an ending point. And so that is the progressive tense. It is a continuing action. Now, some teachers will say it's the continuous tense. Some people will say it's the progressive tense. They're the same thing, but I'm going to use the word progressive for our lesson today. So, when you are stretching out time, this continuing action, you need to know that there is a pattern that we use for the past, present, or the future progressive tense. And that pattern is here. So we have be, verb, ing, right? So when you create the progressive tense, you need to have the be verb, and then whatever main verb you are using, add ing at the end. Now, if you just have verbing, this is actually a present participle, which I don't think you've gotten into yet, but you need to have the be verb. If you don't have it, just verbing could be a gerund, or it could be an adjective. So you need to have the be verb before the verb ing to make it into a verb that you're using in your sentence. Now this be verb, you can see it has these little brackets on the side. Why is that? Because you need to have subject-verb agreement when you're using this be in the past tense and the present tense. The future tense is a little bit tricky, but we'll get into that. So remember, every single past, present, or future progressive verb tense, you have to include be verbing. So here, when you use the past tense, what is the past tense of be? Now when you're using subject-verb agreement, be could be was or were. So it depends upon your subject, right? So if you use let's use our pronouns. If I use I, do I say I were? No, I would say I was. You, we, they were. He, she, it was, right? So when you're using the subject-verb agreement, just remember what is your subject. Is it singular? Is it plural? And try to remember to match that accordingly. So you're going to use was or were as the past tense of your be verb, and then verb ing. For the present tense, what is the present form of the be verb, right? And so we have is, am, or are. And you can choose these, again, depending upon your subject. So if I say I is, no. I are, no. I am. He, she, it is. You, we, they are. Okay? So remember subject-verb agreement for that. Again, is, am, are, verbing. Be verbing. Be verbing. In the future tense, what do we have? You have two patterns you can use. The simplest pattern is will plus something. And this something is all of it. Now, why did I not change this be to include subject-verb agreement? You don't do that in the future tense. For this pattern, it's not will is verbing or will am verbing or will was verbing. That makes no sense. So it's just will plus be verbing. This be doesn't change, but you need to have it. You can't just say will making, right? Or will playing. You need to have will be making, will be playing for the future tense for this pattern. This second pattern for the future tense is be going to be verbing. There's two be's. But this be, just like this be, doesn't change. You're using it this way all the time. This first be, you have to have subject-verb agreement. So, I am going to be playing. Remember, I'm not saying I am going to am playing. That doesn't work. So only change the first be verb when you're having a longer verb pattern. Okay? So here, was, were, change the be. Is, am, are, change the be, verbing, verbing. Here, will be verbing, or is, am, are going to be verbing. You're not going to use this in the past. There is no was or were here. This is always going to be is, am, or are going to be verbing. All right, so that is the patterns for our progressive tense. When do we use the progressive tense? You've already learned that the present progressive tense, we are talking about now. We're talking about some kind of unfinished action. It started now, and you're still doing it now. But are you going to be doing it forever? No! So this is a temporary action. It is unfinished, and we are doing it right now. Okay? So if I say, I am teaching you, I'm doing that right now. Will I be teaching you until next year or until the end of time? Maybe, but not on this video, right? So the idea is it's starting now, it's going on right now, we're stretching out the now, but we're not going to go on forever, okay? So it's an unfinished action, it's also a temporary action now. When we're using the past, right, there's different ways that we can use it, but one of the main ways is an overlapping action. Overlapping just means you have two things that are kind of happening at the same time. But is it happening now? No, it happened in the past. But we're trying to say a couple of things that happened in the past, and that's why I want to go over the complex sentence. How do we use the progressive tense? Now, we talked about complex sentences before. Complex sentences are IC-DC or DC, IC. So basically you have two clauses, an independent clause and a dependent clause, and when you put them together, one of them is the progressive tense, one of them is going to be the simple tense, and then you can create this overlapping action using a complex sentence with the progressive verb tense. And I'll show you an example of that to kind of make it easier for you to understand. Now when we go over to the future tense, same idea, we can also use overlapping action here. And it's the same way that we're going to use it over here. We have to have a progressive tense clause, and you also have to have a simple tense clause, and you put them together to show that some action was happening at the same time, either in the past or something that could happen in the future. So let's look at a couple of examples to show us using our progressive tense, and also this little extra difficult part. How can we use the progressive tense in complex sentences? Alright, so we just finished talking about the progressive verb tenses, and even though we know the basics of it, I want to kind of show you a new way where you can use it with a complex sentence. Now, what is a complex sentence? You should already know complex sentence has an independent clause and a dependent clause, right? A dependent clause just has a dependent clause marker at the beginning. Now, a dependent clause marker changes an independent clause into a dependent clause. So if I say, I am tired, that is an independent clause. If I say, when I am tired, adding the word when before I am tired turns that into a dependent clause. So the when is your dependent clause marker. You should have already had this lesson. So when it comes to complex sentences with the progressive verb tense, we're going to be using something called overlapping action. Overlapping action is when two things are kind of happening at the same time, either in the past or something that could be happening at the same time in the future. So with the past progressive tense and trying to make a complex sentence, you have to be careful which dependent clause marker you are using. If you are going to use the progressive tense in your dependent clause, you want to use the DCM while. if you are going to use the simple tense in your dependent clause for your complex sentence, you want to use when. That still might be confusing, so let's look at an example here. This is the past progressive tense and the past simple tense making a complex sentence. So, I was playing when I got hungry. I was playing. This is a independent clause. I was playing. I could stop here and put a period. But complex sentence has an independent clause and a dependent clause. So my dependent clause is when I got hungry. So here, progressive tense, past. Here, I got hungry. Got is your simple past of go. And so when is your DCM, because this is my simple sentence, and this is how you put it together. I'm not going to say I was playing while I got hungry. That doesn't work, okay? You need to use when if you're going to put it with a simple sentence. So, I was playing when I got hungry. You could switch this. When I got hungry, I was playing. And that makes sense too, because you could have IC, DC, or DC, comma, IC, right? You could just move the clauses back and forth. So, I was playing when I got hungry. While I was eating, instead of when I was eating, right? While, because I was eating, be verbing is my progressive tense. While I was eating, what happened at the same time? The overlapping action. While I was eating, I received a call. Not I was receiving a call. This is your simple past tense plus your progressive tense to make your complex sentence. For the past, what about the future? If you're going to use the future, you need to have a future progressive tense and a future simple tense? No, that it should make sense because here we have past progressive and simple past, but in the future you need to have future progressive and simple present. Let's look at an example. My mom said, she will be coming home, okay? She will be coming home. Will be verbing is my future progressive tense. And then when, because my next clause is going to be a simple sentence, when she what? When she finishes her project at work. So when she finishes her project at work, my mom said she will be coming home. I could switch the clauses and they still work. So why can't I say my mom said she'll be coming home when she is or will be finishing her project? Future, or when she will finish her project, it doesn't work, okay? It should, but it doesn't because the grammar is confusing, the timeline is confusing. So in the future, when something happens, then the next overlapping action will be the action of going home, in this case. It could still be confusing. I hope it's not too crazy for you, but just look at the example again. Remember that if you're going to use the overlapping action complex sentence with the progressive verb tense, you need to use the correct DCM. But just remember the simple facts. This is the complicated way of using it. But the simple things to remember about the progressive tense. You need to have the pattern be verbing in every single past, present, or future. The be verb for the past and the present has to have subject-verb agreement. The future, you have two patterns. Will be verbing or be going to be verbing. For that be going to, that first be has to have the subject-verb agreement. After it, be going to, that be verbing doesn't change. That's always going to be. Only the first be changes, not the second be. Okay? With that, we are done for our lesson today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it's not too crazy, but let's review. Progressive verb tense review. What does the progressive verb tense show? It shows a continuing action. It stretches out the idea of time. What is the pattern for all progressive verb tenses? The pattern is be verbing. What do you need to remember about the be verb when using the progressive tense? You need to remember subject-verb agreement. What are the past tense forms of the be verb? Was and were are the past tense forms of be. What are the present tense forms of the be verb? Is, am, and are the present tense forms of be. What are the two patterns for using the future progressive tense? The two patterns are will be verbing and be going to be verbing. When do we use the present progressive tense? We use the present progressive tense to show an unfinished action that is happening right now. When do we use the past and future progressive tense? We use them to show an overlapping action. How do we use complex sentences to show overlapping action? We use one progressive tense clause and one simple tense clause together. What does a dependent clause marker, DCM, do to an independent clause? A DCM in front of an independent clause changes the IC into a DC. Which DCMs do we use in front of a progressive tense IC and a simple tense IC in a complex sentence? We use the DCM while in front of a progressive tense IC and when in front of a simple tense IC. What tense are the clauses in a past overlapping action complex sentence? Both clauses are using the past tense. What tense are the clauses in a future overlapping action complex sentence? The progressive clause is in the future tense, and the simple clause is in the present tense.